Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel, where I react to UFC news, live events, basically just anything related to the UFC. So I kindly ask that if you enjoy the video, a friendly reminder to click the like button. If you want to become a part of this channel, feel free to click the subscribe button. And if you don't want to miss out on anything, you want to stay up to date, feel free to click the notification bell. All of this really contributes to the growth of this channel. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy this one. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday. That means it is time for my favorite episode of the week, Top Knockouts. Now, if you're new to this episode, to this segment, basically what I do is every Thursday prior to a UFC Fight Night or a pay-per-view event, I take every fighter on the main card of said event, and then I look at their top knockouts. Now, the knockouts has to be an official UFC fight, has to be in an official UFC fight, so Dana White's Contender Series doesn't count, and outside the organization doesn't count either. But I take their best knockout. They only get one, otherwise it would be unfair, and then I basically just rank them. So without any further ado, on this week's episode of Top Knockouts, at number 5, Joe Anderson Brito versus Jack Shaw. Now, honorable mentions for Joe Anderson Brito: his knockout win over Andre Fili, that overhand right ended the fight. That was impressive, but just hear me out. Just hear me out. What I'm about to tell you and showcase is it's absurd. I've never seen something like this in my life. So Joe Anderson Brito fought Jack Shaw May 4th, 2024. And prior to that, Joe Anderson Brito made his debut inside of the UFC on January 15, 2022. Ended up losing in his debut, then went on a 5-fight winning streak. Should have been 6 because he beat William Gomez, but we're not here to dispute that. But in his 5th fight for Jack Shaw, and he made it evident that his game plan going into the fight was to absolutely destroy Jack Shaw's legs, because from the very first minute he was persistent on delivering calf kick after calf kick, just absolutely chopping down Jack Shaw. And in the second round, we saw the fruits of his labor. Now, we've seen fights get stopped due to leg kicks because, well, the opponent is just unable to move and the referee steps in, stops the fight. And we've seen fights get stopped due to doctor stoppage, where the doctor basically assesses the fighter, sees a massive cut, might be dangerous for said fighter, and then he stops it due to the risk of that fighter's health and safety. This is the first time in my life where I've seen a doctor stoppage due to a leg kick, and it was justified because Joe Anderson Brito took a chunk out of Jack Shaw's shin, and it was devastating. Bled profusely. Never seen something like this in my life. And in commentary, DC basically asked John Anik what was going on because he couldn't watch. And I kind of feel the same way. It was a tough watch, but do feel like this deserved to be on some sort of list. So yeah, I put it on this one. Then at number 4, Gerald Meerschaert versus Eric Spicely. December 1st, 2017. So Gerald Meerschaert started his UFC career by winning his first 2 fights within the UFC, but then ran into a formidable opponent called Thiago Santos. Yes, that Thiago Santos, and ended up losing by a knockout. But then in the following fight against Eric Spicely in the 2nd round, Gerald Meerschaert delivered a picture-perfect, devastating body kick to the liver, sending Eric Spicely down to the canvas in agonizing pain. Gave him a few follow-up shots just for good measure, but then ended up winning the fight via KO. And to see GM3, a guy that is predominantly a grappler and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, specialist, submission specialist, to see a guy like that get that knockout win, insane. Could have been a walk-off KO. Yeah, it could have been, but just for good measure, he landed those extra super necessary shots. To put it into perspective, Gerald Meerschaert in his 22 fights inside the UFC has 1 KO win. And it's this one. You want to talk about stats? Being efficient? This is what efficiency looks like. Gerald Meerschaert versus Eric Spicer, number 4 on this list. Then moving on to number 3, Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Carlos Ulberg. Yes, the same Carlos Ulberg who recently beat Jan Blachowicz. Now, honorable mention for Kennedy Nzechukwu is his knockout win over Lucas Brzezinski at heavyweight. That was also very clean. Could have been his best knockout. However, I feel like this is the one. So Kennedy started on Dana White's Contender Series, had 2 fights on Dana White's Contender Series, ended up winning both of them, received a UFC contract, and in his UFC debut, he lost to Paul Craig via submission. Happens to the best of them. Then went on a 3-fight winning streak, and in this second fight, got scheduled to fight Carlos Ulberg, and in the second round, Kennedy caught Carlos with a flush right hook, sending Carlos Ulberg to the canvas against the fence. Kennedy teed off on him a little bit, and the referee ended the fight. A really impressive knockout for Kennedy Nzechukwu, especially seeing that Carlos, obviously being the fighter that he is, he landed better in that fight leading up to that knockout, had more volume, was somewhat comfortable, and then it happened. Kennedy delivered the hammer and sent Carlos to the canvas. Therefore, Kennedy getting the victory, getting the fight of the night bonus, and getting the 3 spot on this list. Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Carlos Ulberg. Then moving on to number 2, Lerone Murphy versus Amirkhani, October 30th, 2021. Now, Lerone Murphy debuted inside the UFC on the 7th of September 2019 in a fight that ended in a draw. But ever since, Lerone's been winning. Currently on a 7-fight winning streak prior to his fight against Josh Emmett this weekend. And in the 3rd fight of this 7-fight winning streak, Lerone Murphy fought Amirkhani. Got scheduled to face him on the 30th of October 2021. And in the first round, we saw Marquand implementing his game plan of wrestling. And he took Lerone Murphy down 5 times in the first round. Basically, gave him a few ground and pound shots and wasn't going Lerone's way. But in the second round, in the first 15 seconds of the second round, Lerone Murphy ended up dishing out punishment via a single knee. Amirkhani ended up shooting for a takedown and a full portion knee by Lerone Murphy. It was timed to perfection. It was executed to perfection. Immediately out cold, no necessary follow-up shots needed. We just saw a walk-off KO with Lerone Murphy perfectly timing that knee and sent Marquand into the shadow realm. Mr. Finland turned into Mr. Finish. An insane knockout for Lerone Murphy. And seeing how the first round went, and then seeing how he ended that fight in the opening seconds of the second round, just a spectacular finish for Lerone Murphy, warranting him the number 2 spot on this list. Then at number 1, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. Even Josh Emmett's honorable mentions are diabolical. In his fight against Ricardo Lamas, delivered a left hook and then Ricardo left the chat. In his fight against Michael Johnson, he hit the spit out of Michael Johnson's mouth with an overhand right. This is a Michael Johnson, by the way, who has had insane knockouts inside of the UFC. Might be glazing a little bit. However, back to the storyline. So Josh Emmett, for the first time in his professional career, lost consecutive fights. He lost to Yair Rodriguez in an interim title fight, then he lost to Ilia Topuria. Wanting to rectify the wrongs, Josh Emmett got scheduled to fight Bryce Mitchell on the 16th of December 2023, and in the first round, Josh Emmett landed Little Boy on Bryce Mitchell's head. I have never seen a more devastating knockout in my life. Due to the aftermath of what happened, where Bryce Mitchell had convulsions. That the same thing you get when you have epilepsy or seizure, where your muscles involuntarily just act up. It was a devastating sight. And in commentary, I remember DC and Joe Rogan spoke about it, and Joe mentioned the fact that if ever you see a reaction like this due to a knockout, it tends to be due to, kicks, because obviously a kick has way more force than a punch has. And as he said it, the only one I can remember that looked this bad was Uriah Hall's knockout over, I want to say Senna against Adam Sella when he fought in the Ultimate Fighter. That's the only one. And the fact that what made this worse, a quick physics lesson for everyone watching. Whenever you catch a ball, whether it be a cricket ball, whether it be a baseball without a mitt, your hands after catching or after the ball makes contact, your hands tend to follow the trajectory of where the ball would have been to minimize the impact that the ball has on your hands, right? So the same physics apply in fighting. Now I'm not saying Bryce would have survived it or wouldn't have been knocked out, but if Bryce's head moved backwards as Josh Emmett landed that overhand right, if it went like this, wouldn't probably have been as bad. But the fact that Bryce's head moved forward as he ducked into it, and as his head moved forward, Josh Emmett's fist connected, made it into what it was. A brutal knockout. Haven't seen anything like this in my life. If you had, if you've seen anything like this, please comment it. We'll check it out. But that's why this is number one on this list. Could probably be number one on a lot of lists. If we're being honest, this wasn't a knockout. This was a felony. This was assault. And speaking about efficiency, do you know how many punches was landed in this fight? 2. That was the second one. The second punch of the fight was that one. That's the list. Now let me know in the comment section, do you agree? Is the order correct? Obviously I think that the general consensus is that number one is correct. But would you change the order? Let me know in the comment section. I'd really appreciate it. Have a beautiful day.